ReasonConf is brought to you by our gold sponsors Ahrefs and Chain Street.
So yeah, I had 1 hour. You have 25, so you have no excuses for tomorrow to apply for the open talks. This is going to be short, I hope so, and I want to talk about my way to production with WizML. My way to production is paved with obstacles because I'm working for a consulting company. And so our clients are big clients, like Fortune 500 clients. When you tell them, yeah, we will do TypeScript, and so, no, I don't know, how will we hire people, and so on. So my way to production is not really a coding reason for production, but convincing enterprise teams and convincing enterprise decision makers that Reason might be an option. What we did the last year, instead of going to production with Reason Code, is organizing dojos and organizing at conferences in France. We organized workshops for JavaScript developers, because we think that to convince enterprise teams to do ReasonML, we need to convince developers to look at it, so enterprises can find developers that can code in Reason, because they don't think that we can learn, unfortunately. So we organized like 2-hour workshops with JavaScript developers, like from zero knowledge to some working program. And in these workshops, we learned a lot about where are they stuck? Where do they stop following? You do let x equal 2 and let x equal 2, that's okay, everybody understands. And then you go to a little bit more complicated things about functions and like function calling, that's okay. But where it stacks is it's basically a different understanding of functions. And I give you 2 examples of things where JavaScript developers, they have really a hard time to follow when we talk to them. So their understanding of functions is different. So the first thing is, okay, functions as first-class citizens. There might be errors here because I really didn't have a lot of time. So this is the basics. JavaScript developers should know that. We have a lot of JavaScript developers that do Java in JavaScript, so they even don't know this. That would be a hard time really to convince them. But then it starts with automatic currying. And I think that's really central to the understanding of how functions work in OCaml and Reason. So automatic currying, and the thing that the function is a mathematical structure, and the function returns a function, returns a function, and the function cannot take multiple arguments. And it's just another metaphor. You think in procedures, you think in I'm calling something, and something is been done with my memory, and then you have to change the way you think. And automatic currying, like applying a function with a lot of parameters, getting another function, so that's a hard time for some people. And then comes partial application, and partial application tied to currying. And this is the first time when, yeah, what does it mean? I really don't understand, and so on. So the outcome is that for us, who do functional programming and who do it for years, and it's obvious. For me, it's obvious. When I see a function, it's obvious. I can call it with the parameters and so on. And even in JavaScript, it gets obvious. You make bind or thing. You make fat arrow, fat arrow, fat arrow. You do a function. It's getting obvious. But obvious is a really dangerous word, because obvious means I spent a lot of time to understand these things, and it's obvious because it's my culture. It's something that. It's a connection that's been done in my head, and now it's obvious. But for a lot of people, it's not at all. And you say, hey, yeah, look, you do this. That's simple. No, it's not simple. Definitely, it's really not simple. The other thing is algebraic data types. When you start with algebraic, you've lost. But variant types, pattern matching. That's great. We love that. I mean, we do Reason partly because of this. But when it comes to see that the first time and said, what is that and how do I use it? You have to get used to think differently about data. You have to represent state differently. In JavaScript, you do is valid. You have a Boolean, true, false. And you have to learn to think differently. And now you can represent state with variant types and so on. You can do it in TypeScript, but it's really cumbersome. It takes time. And again, this is what is obvious for us today. We do that every time. I'm starting, when I'm thinking about the domain, it's really domain-driven development. We think, okay, type, variant, what do I have for cases? That's my cases, and that's what I'm doing. But for developers who've never seen that, that's not obvious at all. And if it comes to, if it comes to option and result, and monadic chaining, and map, and bind, and and the other ones, just like, okay, that's easy, you know, you make this little thing here, and that binds, and that chains some calls, and that's a monad, and and that's where you stop. What I wanted to what I wanted to talk about is how do we do that, and how is there some story that we can learn from this, and how do we get enterprise developers to understand us? And if you want it, if you're in a big bank and you have a team and say, oh, let's do that in ReasonML, and the manager says, no, when we get it. So how do we? What's the story we tell? It's a story about well-known abstractions and functional culture. In these workshops, I had sometimes the JavaScript developers, like 50% of the people after half an hour didn't understand nothing. And there are some people who make some Haskell or Elixir, something like that. They just said, okay, ReasonML, that's the thing I want to do. Because they talk the same language, basically. And I have some notes here. And the thing is that it's our vocabulary that's different, and we spent a lot of time to understand these things. And when I said before, that's obvious for us. It's very hard to remember how it was when we didn't know. That's something in our head. I think our brain is working like that. You know, once you understand something, some connections are done, and then you look back and the 100 meters step that you took, it seems like, oh no, but that was nothing. And that's the problem we have. And so I'm talking about culture. I like to talk about culture when I talk about functional programming, because it's a kind of it's cultural practice, it's vocabulary, and it's a way of thinking. And before, when we had this super talk about how to evangelize reason and how not to evangelize reason, there were this differentiation with early adopters and pragmatists, and I wanted to add something about that. Is this: are you ready to think differently, and who is ready to think differently? And I think early adopters, I would just add this definition. It's not another. It's just add the definition. Is early adopters know that they don't know. So they are open to try different things. And these people can jump to another technology very easy. Because basically they think that what they do every day is not an answer. They're always seeking for new answers. And the pragmatists, maybe they are the people to assume to know what programming is. So why would they change? And changing for ReasonML from JavaScript, or changing to ReasonML from an imperative way of thinking, really is it's a change of culture. It's a change of the way we think about code. I'm sure it's the same thing for you. When you learn a new library in your culture, it takes like a couple of days, maybe a weekend, maybe 2 weeks. After 20 years of business, I think my way to functional programming took me 9 months to a year. And now I'm looking back and say, yeah, that's easy. Yeah, that's obvious. But the conclusion is, the reason is not just like JavaScript. And that's what we see at these workshops. It doesn't mean that there's no chance that we do ReasonML development in enterprises. But the thing is that we don't assume, when you talk about it, don't assume a common language. it's not about language. It's not about reason, the language. It's about the language we use when you talk about it. It's about application and currying and monads and chaining and all these functional concepts that are just so obvious for us and they're not obvious for other people. It's another culture. They come from another culture. It's like people who come from complete another country, and you explain them why in Austria they sell Easter eggs everywhere, and it's just another culture. It's really hard to understand. So we need to tell them stories about our culture, and we mustn't just say that. Yeah, you'll see. That's easy. That's simple. No, simplicity is a function of culture. And always remember how it was when you didn't know, when you talk to these people. That was it.